إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل
على محمد وعلى
محمد وأجل فرجه. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض. يسبح لله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض الملك القدوس العزيز الحكيم. هو الذي بعث في الأمين رسولا منهم يتلو عليهم آياته ويزكيهم ويعلمهم الكتاب والحكمة وإن كانوا من قبل لفي ضلال مبين. وآخرين منهم لما يلحقوا بهم وهو العزيز الحكيم. ذلك فضل الله يؤتيه من يشاء والله ذو الفضل العظيم. مثل الذين حملوا التوراة ثم لم يحملوها كمثل الحمار بحمل الأسفار وبحمل الأسفار أنبعث مثل القوم الذين كذبوا بآيات الله والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. قل يا أيها الذين هادوا إن زعمتم أنكم أولياء لله من دون الناس وتمنوا الموت إن كنتم صادقين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. و کسب اجازه از آقا امام زمان در این غروب جمعه in the day of Friday we are missing our Imam Zamanana. Inshallah he will have nazar on our Majlis Azah for Ahlul Bayt. We are in the midst of Shahadat for Imam Hassan Mujtaba and we are getting closer and closer to Arba'een. Inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep all the Muslimin, all the people who are sick with this COVID and all the people who have difficulties in their life and asking for us to make dua for them. Here on this sunset of Friday, we have one more Friday that passed us and we are mahroom and we are not seeing our Imam Zaman, and inshallah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps him in safety and our dua is for him and his dua is for us. And with condolences to Imam Zamanana for Masibat Ahlul Bayt, inshallah we start our weekly Majlis, the weekend Majlis. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajah.
صل على محمد وآل محمد بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. For the love of the Holy Prophet and his holy family, please recite the second salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. For the reappearance of our awaited Savior, please recite the third salawat. Allahumma salli ala
محمد وآل
Ali.
محمد.
The marsiya that I have tonight describes the arrival of the wife of Yazid, Hinda, to the place where the captives, the family of the Holy Prophet is kept. So the poet tries to capture those scenes around him. Fida ho us par salami hai jiska naam, fida ho us par salami hai jiska naam Hussain, mera moi mera آقا میرا امام, میرا موئی میرا آقا میرا امام حسین, صبا کو بھیج کے روزے بکر رہا ہوں, دعا کرے قبول الہی میرا سلام, کرے قبول الہی میرا سلام حسین. سنانا ہے کسی سنگ دل نے لاکھ کہا, رسول کا ہوں نواسا ہے میرا نام, رسول کا ہوں نواسا ہے میرا نام حسین. میں اپنے دل کو بہت پاک و صاف رکھتا ہوں کہ شاید اس میں کسی دن کرے قیام, کہ شاید اس میں کسی دن کرے قیام حسین. پناہ لیتے تھے دشمن اجل کے دامن میں, جو وار کرتے تھے لے کر علی کا نام, جو وار کرتے تھے لے کر علی کا نام حسین. فدا ہوں اس پر صلوات. اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد. قید خانے میں تلا تم ہے کہ ہند آتی ہے, دختر فاطمہ غیرت سے موئی جاتی ہے, روح قلب میں وہ زندان میں گھبراتی ہے, بے حواسی سے ہر ایک بات چلاتی ہے, آسماں دور زمین سخت کدھر جاؤں میں, بیویوں مل کے دعا مانگو کہ مر جاؤں میں, بیویوں مل کے دعا مانگو کہ مر جاؤں میں, کیا کروں کیا نہ کروں جلد بتاؤ لوگو, صدقہ اکبر کا حقارت سے بچاؤ لوگو, اوٹ کر کے ہو کھڑے مجھ کو چھپاؤ لوگو, یا کسی گوش میں لے جا کے بٹھاؤ لوگو, سر کھلی ہوں کسی حجرے میں مجھے بند کرو, ہند آتی ہے مجھے خاک کا پیوند کرو, ہند آتی ہے مجھے خاک کا پیوند کرو. ناگہاں فضا نے دی اہل حرم کو یہ خبر, ہند آتی ہے بڑے جاہو تحمل سے ادھر, بیرقی نخرا زر کی ہے جلو کے اندر سب کنیزوں تو ردھا اوڑی ہیں وہ ننگے سر سب کنیزیں تو ردھا اوڑی ہیں وہ ننگے سر پر سواری بہت آہستہ رواں ہوتی ہے ہر قدم ہند ٹہر جاتی ہے اور روتی ہے ہر قدم ہند ٹہر جاتی ہے اور روتی ہے کہتی ہے قیدیوں کے شور بکا نے مجھ کو اس ہائے حسینہ کی صدا نے مارا ان کے سردار کو کس اہل جفا نے مارا کیا وہ سید جسے اہل دغا نے مارا ایک تجلی سی کلیجے پا میرے گرتی ہے ننگے سر فاطمہ آنکھوں کے تلے پھرتی ہے ننگے سر فاطمہ آنکھوں کے تلے پھرتی ہے سب نے منہ کر کے سوئے ہند یہ کی نوحگری دیکھیے شام کے زندہ میں چراغ سحری یاد خالق میں جو ہے خلق سے ہے بے خبری کیوں مسلسل کیا یہ تو ہے عدم کا سفری کس نے دم بند کیا توقع جفا اس کا سلسلہ ملتا ہے کچھ شیر خدا سے اس کا سلسلہ ملتا ہے کچھ شیر خدا سے اس کا گرد عابد کے پھری ہند یہ حال تغیر رکھ دیا پاؤں پسر اپنا ہٹا کر زنجیر بولے وہ کون ہے بولی کہ کنیز شبیر السلام اے رسن و توخ و سلاسل کے امیر السلام اے رسن و توخ و سلاسل کے اسیر ہے وسیعت کا محل مرنے پا تیار ہے تو کچھ کفن کے لیے رکھتا ہے کہ نادار ہے تو کچھ کفن کے لیے رکھتا ہے کہ نادار ہے تو غم نہ کھا رو کفن میں تجھے دوں گی واللہ ننگے سر تیرے جنازے کے چلوں گی ہمراہ مرنے والے تیرا کیا نام ہے کب سے تباہ بولے مولا بھی 40 برس جینا ہے بولے مولا بھی 40 برس جینا ہے نام بے کس بھی ہے قیدی بھی ہے نادار بھی ہے حال یہ ہے کہ اسیری بھی ہے آزار بھی ہے حال یہ ہے کہ اسیری بھی ہے آزار بھی ہے ہند نے پوچھا مرض کیا ہے کہا ہے بے پدری رو کے وہ بولی دوا کیا ہے کہا نوحگری گھر جو دریافت کیا کہنے لگے در بدری بولی لیتا ہے خبر کون کہا بے خبری کرنے کا سبب پوچھا تو شرمانے لگے تازیانوں کے نشا پشت پر دکھلانے لگے تازیانوں کے نشا پشت پر دکھلانے لگے صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد وعجل فرج
صلوات محمد وآل Muhammad. Just quick reminder, inshallah, we will start Majlis again tomorrow, 8 o'clock, with Quran and Marcia, followed by Brother Shabbir Kirmani's speech at 8:30. The Sunday Majlis is start at 2 o'clock, inshallah, this Sunday. And then we have a new speaker for next week. It's called Maulana
Asid Hosseini. He will be reciting and addressing the Majlis, same time, 8 o'clock. Marghoob bhai, you want to do the salam?
Inshallah. بر محمد وآل محمد بلندر صلوات
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala
محمد وآل
Muhammad.
محمد. بس 2-3 بند, only 2-3
I think we have time.
Okay. اللهم صل محمد وآل محمد. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. غریب زہرا کی غربت سنو اے اہل عزا. غریب زہرا کی غربت سنو اے اہل عزا. اکیلا رہ گیا مقتل میں جب میرا مولا. سپاہ شام نے چاروں طرف سے گھیر لیا اور لبے فرات تھا ہر ایک خون کا پیاسا. تھا گل چراغ امامت ابھی بجھانا ہے. زمیں پزین سے شبیر کو گرانا ہے. غریب زہرا کی غربت سنو اے اہل عزا. یہ سن کے سنگ کسی نے جبین پر مارا اور کسی نے پہلو میں برچھی کا پھل اتار دیا. کسی نے سامنے آ کر چلائی تیغ جفا. غریب زہرا قاضی پر سنبھلنا مشکل تھا. علی و زہرا کو رن میں رلایا جاتا تھا. حسین گرتے نہیں تھے گرایا جاتا تھا. ارے حسین گرتے نہیں تھے گرایا جاتا تھا. اور لگا جو تیر تو اصغر کو شہ نے یاد کیا اور پکارا غازی کو جس وقت سر پہ گرز لگا. لگی جو برچھی تو اکبر کو دی تڑپ کے صدا اور تماچا خولی نے مارا تو بولے یا زہرا. علی کو یاد کیا سر پہ ضرب چلتے ہوئے اور حسن کو یاد کیا منہ سے خون گلتے ہوئے. اور زمیں پازین سے حضرت جو منہ کے بل آئے جو تیر سینے میں تھے پشت سے نکل آئے. نکل کے پہلو سے سب برچھیوں کے پھل آئے اور قرار کس طرح شہر کو ایک پل آئے. رکاب پیروں سے ابن علی کی چھوٹ گئی اور تمام پسلیاں سبتے نبی کی ٹوٹ گئی غریب زہرا کی غربت سنو اے اہل عزا اور اکیلا رہ گیا مقتل میں جب میرا مولا بر محمد وعلیہ السلام اللہم صلی محمد وعلیہ.
Anybody else want to recite anything? Because we still have about 7 minutes before Brother Kirmani joins us, inshallah.
I can read a salam, inshallah.
Inshallah. Jazakallah.
Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Allahumma salli ala
Allahumma
صلی
salli
علی
ala
محمد
Muhammad
وعلی
wa ali
محمد.
Muhammad.
شام ہے غریبوں کی ہولناک منظر ہے. شام ہے غریبوں کی ہولناک منظر ہے. بے حواس میدان میں بے حواس میدان میں عطرت پیمبر ہے. تیرگی ہے دہشت ہے ہائے کیا قیامت ہے. تیرگی ہے دہشت ہے ہائے کیا قیامت ہے. بے کسوں کی نگرانی بے کسوں کی نگرانی اور علی کی دختر ہے. شام ہے غریبوں کی ہولناک منظر ہے. چھا چکی ہے تاریکی پھر بھی ظلم ہے جاری. چھا چکی ہے تاریکی پھر بھی ظلم ہے جاری. شمر کے تماچے ہیں شمر کے تماچے ہیں شاہدی کی دختر ہے. شام ہے غریبوں کی ہولناک منظر ہے. ایک یتیم بچی کو ہائے یوں ملا پرسا. ایک یتیم بچی کو ہائے یوں ملا پرسا. کان ہو گئے زخمی کان ہو گئے زخمی پشت خون میں تر ہے. شام ہے غریبوں کی ہولناک منظر ہے. صلوات اللہم صلی علی محمد و آل محمد.
So Brother Sheikh Sayyid Kirmani is here now. So inshallah, I will ask him that we are ready whenever he's ready to start. Salawat.
Allahumma salli
ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad ajal farajum.
Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
اللہم صلی علی محمد وعلی محمد.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فوض أمري إلى الله إن الله بصير بالعباد ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم حسبنا الله ونعم الوكيل ونعم المولى ونعم النصير والصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على الرسول المسدد المصطفى الأمجد المحمود الأحمد الذي سمي في السماء بأحمد وفي الأرض بأبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا اللهم صل على محمد وقل رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي أما بعد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كتاب الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة صدق الله العلي العظيم. My respected elders, brothers and sisters in Iman in Kansas City, throughout the United States and throughout the globe, wherever you are hearing my voice, Salamun alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Question. What is the power of patience? Keep this question in the back of your mind, inshallah. We'll return to it. We're told there's a moment in time in the history, according to Imam Jawad alayhi salam, there's a moment where Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is in the vicinity of Masjid al-Haram, in the vicinity of the Kaaba. He is alongside with Salman on one side, Salman al-Farsi or Salman al-Muhammadi, and on the other side he is with Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. When they enter into the vicinity of the Holy Kaaba, at that point in time, they go and proceed towards the Kaaba. When they get closer towards the Kaaba, we're told, according to this narration from Imam Jawad alayhi salam, that a man who has been described in the hadith as someone who's handsome and relatively young approaches Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. When he approaches Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, at that point in time, he says, I wish to ask you some questions. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, very well, you're welcome to ask them. He then continues and says that I will assess based on your answers to these questions. If you answer them, then I will know that you are the Hujjah of Allah on earth. And if you are not answering them appropriately, then I will know the people will have followed the wrong individual. The people will have followed the wrong person. At that point in time, when this was heard at that point in time, that this understanding that the wrong person will be followed, will be understood, the people began to think, who is this individual? Who is this person who has said such a statement that he's saying that if you answer correctly, then I accept. And if you answer incorrectly, then I will not accept your wilayah and the people will follow the wrong person. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen at that point in time, when he heard this, he said, very well, ask your questions. And remember, Salman is with him, and Imam Hassan alayhi salam is with him at that point in time. The man proceeded and he said, very well. He says at that point in time, he asks the first question and he begins to look towards the Imam alayhi salam. And he says that my first question is that the soul, when the man goes to sleep at night, when a person goes to sleep at night, what happens to the soul? Does the soul separate? Does it depart? Where's the soul? He says, that's my first question. He says, very well. He says, what about your second? He said, my second question is, why is it that sometimes people remember something, sometimes they don't remember something? And what is the cause for someone to be able to remember something? And what is the cause for someone to forget something? He said, very well. He said, what's the third question? He said, the third question that I have is that why is it that sometimes the facial features of an individual, they may resemble some and they may not resemble others. For example, he said in particular, why is it that the facial features of a child, many times they resemble not the father directly, but the uncle, either paternal or maternal? Why? At that point in time, Amir al-Mu'mineen had heard these questions. You would think that the Imam would answer them himself. Of course, he knows the answers. But he looks towards Imam Hassan. He says, Hassan, my son, answer these questions. At that point in time, the Imam alayhi salam answered all the questions. When he answered all the questions, at that point in time, the narration says, according to Imam Jawad, this man, he looks towards Amir al-Mu'mineen and points. He says that I testify and I bear witness that you are the Hujjah of Allah on earth after Rasulullah. And then he pointed towards Imam Hassan and he says, I testify and I bear witness that you are the Hujjah of Allah on earth after him, pointing to Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen. And he said that I bear witness that after you, the Hujjah of Allah on earth is Hussein ibn Ali. And he said, I bear witness that after him, the Hujjah of Allah on earth is Ali ibn al-Hussein. And after him, the Hujjah of Allah on earth is Muhammad ibn Ali. And then after him, Ja'far ibn Muhammad. And after him, Musa ibn Ja'far. And after him, all the way down to Imam Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. At that point in time, when this happened, the Imam alayhi salam, Amir al-Mu'mineen, saw this and he said, very well. He said that that person who said this, he turned around and he began to leave the Masjid al-Haram's vicinity. That is the Kaaba's mosque. The mosque around the Kaaba called Masjid al-Haram. He began to leave. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen looked to Imam Hassan. He said, my son Hassan, go after him and see his exit. At that point in time, Imam Hassan followed him. And when he followed him, we are told in this narration that as soon as he stepped out the vicinity of the masjid, right away, he disappeared. Imam Hassan alayhi salam comes back. When Imam Hassan alayhi salam comes back, he says, Ya Amir al-Mu'min. Of course he knows, he's telling for you and I. But he's saying that he says, my father, as soon as he stepped out the vicinity of the masjid, he disappeared. He says, my son, do you know who this is? Of course Imam Hassan knows, but he's telling for you and I. He says, my father, who is it? He says, Hassan, this individual was none other than Khizr alayhi salam. Khizr is the one who asked these questions. What were the questions that Khizr asked? And what were the answers according to Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam? Because we don't want to leave the narration concluded. Because according to the scholars, they have said that the answers have also been given. So what was the first question that Imam Hassan alayhi salam answered? The question was, what happens to the soul at night? Does it disappear? Does it stay? Does it stay normal? Now, whether these are literal interpretations, whether these are scientific interpretations and the science has to catch up, that is what the ulama differ on. But there is some understanding of what the Imam is saying here. What does he say? He says in response to Khizr alayhi salam, remember, Musa and Khizr, the teacher, Musa did not even understand what's going on. Khizr is explaining to him that Khizr is getting his answers answered by Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. At that point in time, he says, what happens to the soul at night? Imam Hassan alayhi salam says that the soul in the middle of the night, it is hung against the wind. And the wind is hung against the air. And the Imam alayhi salam says, if there is a situation where the soul pulls the wind and the wind pulls the air, the soul comes back to the body and the person wakes up in the day. He said, however, if the air pulls the wind and the wind pulls onto the soul and it pulls it in such a way that it does not come back, then the person's soul leaves them and they leave this physical world. Khizr said, very well, I accept, I understand, very, very well. He said, what about when someone remembers and when someone forgets? Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen's son, Imam Hassan, responds at that point in time and he says it's very clear that whenever someone forgets, it is because they have not sent a salawat on Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad in a complete sense. And he says when they remember, it is because they send a complete salawat on Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. Why is this significant and why is this important? Because there are some people today in this world who refuse to send a complete salawat on the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam and Rasulullah. And Rasulullah himself says that a salawat that does not include my al, that is my Ahlul Bayt, it is a salat or a salawat that is batra, that is cut off, that is incomplete. That is, that when you send a salawat on Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad, you must say wa Ali Muhammad. Why is it that there are people in this world, they feel a stinginess to not be able to send a salawat on the al when Rasulullah himself has said it? So therefore Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he said that those who send a complete salawat with Muhammad and the al, their memory is jogged. This is, by the way, as a side note, why when our scholars, our top maraji, and I've spent some time with some of these in Najaf, or for example, the families such as Al-Hakim family, Bahr al-Ulum family, the Tabatabai family, which we'll come to in a moment, or Hassani Sadat, if you sit with them and they forget something, even for an instant, right away they say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. If you are taking your exams, if you are studying, if you are at work, whatever you are, remember this, it will help you in difficult times. The third question that came up was, why is it that sometimes the facial features resemble not the father, but sometimes the uncle, either maternal or paternal? The answer to this is given in the books, but because of its nature, I recommend that you go and do some homework and find this answer with respect to it. It is not age appropriate and parental discussion is advised. Therefore, I'm leaving it out. Although the answer has been given according to the scholars and I know it, but it's not the forum to share it. This was the ilm of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba being personified and showed to Khizr, who was the one who was mentoring and teaching Musa as per the Quran. I say this because according to historians and ulama, there is a narration that is attested to that the 7th of Safar is considered to be the martyrdom and istishhad of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam. Of course, along the lines of the 28th Safar riwayat as well. But therefore, I think it's very important and it is very appropriate and important for us to understand Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, because Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam is that person who helped lay the foundation for the success of Sayyid al-Shuhada in Karbala. You see, many questions arise with respect to what happened in Karbala and why was the stance of Imam Hussein seemingly different than the stance of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. And therefore, on top of that, people begin to say, was Imam Hussein a brave and courageous Imam, and Imam Hassan was not a brave and courageous Imam? They say that, for example, if Imam Hussein was in the place of Imam Hassan, would he do the peace treaty that Imam Hassan signed? And for example, if Imam Hussein was in Karbala, would he be doing what Imam Hussein did? Many questions arise with respect to the personality of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, number one. Number two, there are elements of propaganda that were done on Imam Hassan that makes it so important for you and I to remember and commemorate Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, particularly in this day and age, because we must understand what was going on during his time, what was the propaganda done on him, and also how did he, despite all these difficulties, help lay the foundation for the success of what was to happen in Karbala. Therefore, tonight, I want to look at some very important concepts from the life of this Imam. This Imam can give us lessons and answers to some of our biggest problems in our modern world. You see, we live in a world and we live in an era in time where we have, for example, political turmoil, political injustice at the local, at the state, at the national level. We have, for example, what many people are calling, for example, a lack of leadership that is being shown, a lack of justice that is being shown. We have social justice issues that are happening in our world, race-related justice issues in our world. All of these problems that we are seeing on the global front, locally as well as abroad, for example, the turmoil that is happening between sectarian violence that is happening in some parts of the world, for example, the subcontinent and other places, all of the answers to these problems can be seen in the pages of history if we study history and understand what happened during the time of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba and after that. Therefore, to get answers to this, I want to look at what is the power of patience tonight, and how, when we are patient, we can achieve the most greatest accomplishments. Aristotle has said that patience is bitter. Arastu says patience is bitter, but its fruit is sweet. That this line has been taken in Urdu and Farsi and many other languages, that the fruit of patience is very sweet. This has been known for thousands of years. But who are the people who act on this? They're very few. Therefore, tonight, I want to look at what was going on during the time of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, and how did it lay the seeds for the success of Karbala and Sayyid al-Shuhada on the plains of Karbala. I want to look at what was happening during the time of the Khulafa before Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, and who was the first Umayyad Khalifa, and how did he lay the groundwork for what was to happen afterwards, and how did Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen and Imam Hassan alayhi salam handle that situation. I want to look at what is the resemblance between what happened during the time of Imam Hassan and what was happening during the time of the French Revolution, as well as what was happening during the time of our modern era, what's going on right now, and how can we get lessons and answers to our world based on that. I want to look at, for example, what were the akhlaqi traits of the Imam alayhi salam that you and I can embody and understand and implement in our lives so that we have a better future and a better personal life. I want to understand this question. How did the Imam alayhi salam, Imam Hassan alayhi salam in particular, how did his lineage continue? How did his line continue? If Qasim ibn al-Hassan was martyred in Karbala, how did the line of the Imam alayhi salam continue? And then I want to look at, for example, what was the musibah and the tragedy of this Imam, so that you and I can understand what debt and what great role he played, so we can be Shia today on this planet. Wherever you are, from the bottom of your heart, in Kansas City, throughout America, or wherever you are hearing my voice, from the bottom of your heart, send the salawat on Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Having said this, this is our agenda. The first principle that I want to lay out is Amir al-Mu'mineen, and I want you to never forget this, my young and old alike, my brothers and sisters. Amir al-Mu'mineen, in his wasiyah, his will to his son, often a person in their wasiyah, do they write something that is not important? In fact, you will find that when someone writes a will, their last testament, when they're writing their will, they usually write the most important thing in their life, the most important thing that you can give, the best advice that you can give. He writes Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, to his son, for example, either Muhammad Hanafiya or Hassan ibn Ali. Nonetheless, he writes this, many scholars say, to Imam Hassan alayhi salam. He says, my son Hassan. Is he saying it to Imam Hassan or is he saying it to us? Imam Hassan is an imam, he knows, but he's giving us guidance. He says, my son, I want you to study the pages of history. Study the pages of what? Fiqh, usul, mantiq, akhlaq. No, those are all important. But the Imam is saying, no. I want you to study tariq, history. Islamic history? Islamic history is very new. No. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Amir al-Mu'mineen saying about himself, I studied the pages of history up until the point it was as if I had walked amongst the relics of past civilizations. You know, the archaeologist who goes down and looks in the pyramids, they find fossils. Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying the same thing. Through my readings, through my understanding, and of course the ilm that he had, that was ilm al-ghaib, but he's giving a lesson here. Study the pages of history so that you can see what brought good and what brought harm to the past civilizations. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying this. He said, although I did not live as long as some of them, I understood what brought them good and what brought them harm. By the way, a side note for any of our youth who are going, if you want to study the life of billionaires, no, whether it's Ray Dalio, Warren Buffett, or anyone who's made billions of dollars in the markets, they say the secret to success is understanding philosophy, psychology, and history, most importantly, because the market is a game of only these three. When you understand human nature and the trends of history, you know what's going to happen. Ray Dalio, for example, is one of the most successful hedge fund managers in history. He says, when I began to study history, I understood the markets. This is the power of understanding history. But Oxley, the British writer, says, perhaps the greatest lesson of history is that man does not take heed of history. Man does not learn from history. And the Quran reflects this. The Quran says this from the very beginning. Do they not reflect on the past civilizations that came before? The qawms, the nations that came before, the ones that were destroyed, what brought them good, what brought them harm? The Quran says tafakkur and tadabbur, contemplate, reflect. But we don't reflect. Amir al-Mu'mineen is saying, study the pages of history. Why? Because you will find what happened during the time of the Imam and what happened only 200, 300 years ago and what's happening today are the same. Today we have political unrest. Today we have a situation where there is extremist rhetoric on the global stage, whereas there is polarization and polarizing rhetoric on the global stage. What type of leadership is this? The same thing happened during the time of the Imams. What happened? Who was the first Umayyi ruler? Who was the first Umayyad ruler from Bani Umayyah after Rasulullah? The first ruler is not Abu Bakr, not Umar, it is Uthman bin Affan. Uthman bin Affan, much like Umar ibn al-Khattab, the second Khalifa, they began to undo what Rasulullah did. What do I mean? This is a historical, everything I'm saying is a historical fact. What do I mean? You see, Rasulullah shared from the very beginning, what is it that attracted Muslims or non-Muslims to Islam? If you look at Malcolm X, if you look at much of the African American community who became Muslim, if you look at people throughout the world who came and converted to Islam, what brought them to Islam? Many of them say it was the egalitarian nature of Islam. What does that mean? It's the equal nature of Islam. That Islam, from the beginning, Rasulullah said that no Arab is better than a non-Arab, and no non-Arab is better than an Arab, except on the basis of taqwa. You see, this was unfathomable at that time because the world was filled with class systems. The world was filled with Arab and Ajam. The Arabs thought that they were better than everyone else, to the extent that if you recall that they called themselves Arab, and anyone who was not Arab was Ajam. Ajam meaning mute. They could not even speak. That's the pride they had. If you go to Hinduism, there's a caste system with Brahmins at the top, then the warrior class, then the merchant class, all the way down to the untouchables. Islam came forward and said, no, There's no class system. There's no materialism. There's no haves and have-nots. No, it's all equal, except on the basis of God consciousness. That's the only way you differentiate. This attracted the marginalized person in society. And this is why the likes of Bernard Shaw and others said that if Muhammad, that is Rasulullah, took over the dictatorship of Europe, I believe that Europe's problems would be solved. He's saying this, not a Muslim who's saying, I studied Muhammad, I understood Muhammad, and I know what he's doing, and I understood his ethos and his vision. He can solve our problems, because he was talking about equality in society. So what did Omar do? Omar began to establish favoritism again, tribalism again. Uthman took this a step further. What did he begin to do? Uthman, the third Khalifa, began to say, for example, he began to give more property to Banu Umayyah, his family and his clansmen. He, for example, began to marginalize other people, such as who? The Kufans. For example, the Kufans, number one. For example, the Egyptians, and keep the Egyptians in mind. The Egyptians were very upset with Uthman because he began to usurp people's property and give it to other people. They became very upset. Now, on top of that, Uthman, he also cut off the stipend of Aisha. Aisha, who was the al-Mu'mineen according to Muslims, because she was the wife of Rasulullah, her stipend was cut by Uthman. Now, understand what happened at that point in time. The Egyptians were very upset. They came to Medina from Egypt towards Medina to meet with Uthman. They said, we want to meet with you. We're not very happy with how you're dealing with us. Uthman made the first major blunder of a leader. This is something that all leaders on the community level, on the state level, on the national level should all understand. What is that? That when you are a leader, you must listen to the grievances of your subjects. You must listen to those people who are in your community who are not happy, those people who are upset in your society. Because if you don't, the repercussions can be very bad. So what happened? Uthman said, I'm not going to meet with the Egyptians. He said, Ali, he said actually to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali, you have a good relationship with them, talk to them, let them go. I'm not interested in meeting them. The Khalifa of the Muslims, quote unquote, is saying, I'm not interested in meeting them. So what happened? Aisha was already upset that her stipend, her income from Baytul Mal had been cut off. So she told the Egyptians to revolt against him and attack him. Attack who? Uthman. So the Egyptian mob went towards the palace where Uthman was, and they went to attack. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he sends Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba to go and try to calm the mob so as they don't kill Uthman. And he says this in Nahj al-Balagha, sermon number 30, Amir al-Mu'mineen 30. In that khutbah, he says that the people, they stormed and they went towards Uthman. He said that if I had gone to protect Uthman, you would say I was his helper. And if, for example, if I went with the Egyptians, you would say I was with the Egyptians and I was responsible for the murder and the assassination of Uthman. You see, at this point in time, when this occurred, when this happened, you see all the seeds of what happened, the civil wars that happened during the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Siffin, Jamal, Nahrawan, civil wars between Muslims were laid during this time. At that point in time, Aisha heard this news and she began to tell people, because the Egyptians went to Uthman, they killed Uthman. They assassinated Uthman. Imam Hassan tried to stop them. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, if I went, you would say I'm with the Egyptians. And if I was on the side of Uthman, you would say that I was against the Egyptians. Therefore, I sent Hassan to take care of the situation. Aisha took the advantage of this situation. What she came forward and said was, she said that it was Ali's fault because Ali is the one who didn't go and defend Uthman. On top of that, Muawiyah also began to do his politics on top of this. So Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen was getting pressure from all of the sides. And he says, I leave, in sermon 30 of Nahj al-Balagha, he says, I leave this in the court of the people, that I decided that I will not support Uthman, nor will I support the Egyptians. He says the Egyptians were wrong because they should not have done that. They should not have killed him. They should have resolved the matter through a peace treaty or something of this nature. But what's the lesson you and I get? We see we're having riots today. We're having political unrest. We're having turmoil. You must listen to those people who are upset. Never push people who are at the edge and people who have nothing to lose to the edge. If you push people who have nothing to lose to the edge, you notice that there's chaos in society. What's the example? 1789. The French Revolution. 1789, French Revolution. What happened? According to historians, and you notice how what happened there is exactly what happened again. During the time of Uthman, same thing happened in France. What happened? The monarchs are ruling, the kings are ruling, King Louis and the likes are ruling. They have lavish feasts in their house. The people are starving in the streets, they don't have bread to eat. The statement comes, Marie Antoinette, the wife of the ruler of the king, she's attributed to have said. Some people say she didn't say, she said or she didn't say. Some people have come to the conclusion that even if they didn't say it, the sentiment was there. So when she heard that they don't have bread to eat, she said, then why do they not eat cake? They should eat cake. Meaning cake was much more expensive compared to bread. So this is how disconnected they were with the general public. So what happened? They stormed the Bastille, they stormed the palace, and they began to, the guillotine came out and there was bloodshed and the whole regime was toppled. Today, whether that happens or not, I don't know. I hope we don't get to that situation, that stage. However, there is much data that shows that when there is uncertainty, such as now in the COVID environment, in the COVID world, you notice that people begin to become very uncertain and they do the most irrational thing that you can imagine, that you can think of. Now, the question that emerges here is that what will happen in our world? Will we have patience and peace prevail? Or will we have an environment where people will get very ruffled? The next question that I want to come up to understand, so you and I can understand this and understand the solutions, is what was the difference between the stand of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein? Because we must understand, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein alayhi salam were completely aligned in their mission, in their vision, and how they proceeded. So was it an issue that Imam Hassan differed with Imam Hussein or not? Alama Tabatabai, Sahib Tafsir al-Mizan, gives a beautiful answer to this. He says, in the difference in the stand between Hassan and the difference in the stand of Hussein, it's not an issue of Hassan and Hussein. Why? Because the Quran, where is Imam Hassan in the Quran? Where is Imam Hussein in the Quran? They are littered in the Quran. They are throughout the Quran. Where are they? For example, Surah Al-Insan, Surah Al-Dahr, the very famous verse, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. That was there not a time on man where he was not worth remembering, where he was not worth mentioning? Surah Al-Insan, that is accepted by all Muslims, Shia, Sunni, doesn't matter, that these verses were revealed for Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, without a shadow of a doubt, no doubt about it. That when they وَيُطْعِمُونَ الطَّعَامَ عَلَى حُبِّهِ مِسْكِينًا وَيَتِيمًا وَحَسِيرًا was for Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. In particular, Ali, Fatima, Hassan, Hussein. These people were, this verse was revealed. So he's in the Quran there, number one, no doubt about it. Where else? The verse that talks about Shajaratan Mubarakatan, La Sharqiyya wa La Gharabiyya, that is the blessed tree that is neither Eastern nor Western. The Mufassirin of the Quran have said that that tree is the Ahlul Bayt, and that tree is the lineage in particular of Fatima Az-Zahra through Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Therefore, he's there. Where else? In Mubahila. There's no doubt. You all know the event of Mubahila, that Abna'ana wa Abna'akum, that when the line came, this bring your sons and bring our sons, Imam Hassan alayhi salam and Imam Hussein were brought as the sons. Where else within the ahadith are Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein? For example, Rasulullah, in the very famous tradition, he says, Al-Hassan wal-Hussein imaman qama aw qa'da. That Hassan and Hussein are imams, whether they are standing or whether they are sitting. Whether, for example, Imam Hassan signs a peace treaty or whether Imam Hussein, he goes to battle. What else? Al-Hassan wal-Hussein Sayyid Shabab Ahl al-Jannah. This is an important one. Because Hassan and Hussein Sayyid Shabab Ahl al-Jannah, sometimes we say that Hassan and Hussein are the masters of the youth of paradise. That is, that when there is Yawm al-Qiyamah and when people are in Jannah, then they will be the masters. No. This means Ahlul Jannah, the people who will be in Jannah, whoever are the people who will be in Jannah, Hassan and Hussein are their masters in this dunya, in this world, and in the akhirah, no doubt about it. You see, sometimes we don't understand. Therefore, Rasulullah is saying they're imams in this dunya, whether you realize it or not. So that's an important point for us to understand, number one. So Imam Hassan and Hussein in the Quran and in the Hadith are solidified as exalted. So why the difference in their approach? Why Imam Hassan with a peace treaty? Why with Imam Hussein alayhi salam in battle? Although Allama Tabatabai says 40,000 people Imam Hassan had, Imam Hassan was ready to go to battle. The people didn't support him. 40,000 he had. Imam Hussein only had 40. And yet Imam Hussein goes to battle. What is the reason? What's the rationale? Allama Tabatabai says the issue and the difference in approach between Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein is not an issue of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. It's an issue of Muawiyah and Yazid. What do you mean? What do you mean, Allama Tabatabai? Sahib Tafsir al-Mizan. He says it's not an issue of Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein. Why? Because 9.5 years Imam Hassan is with Muawiyah. After Imam Hassan is martyred, 9.5 years again Imam Hussein is under, or with, I should say, with Muawiyah. Of course, he doesn't pledge allegiance, but he also doesn't revolt. He doesn't take a stand. 9.5 years. Why? Because the treaty said that when Muawiyah dies, it must go back to Imam Hussein. But this is important. Allama Tabatabai says the stand of Muawiyah and the stand of Yazid was completely different. How? Muawiyah had many problems. Muawiyah was the propaganda machine that led to the cursing of Imam Ali. Muawiyah was that person who paid historian or writer after writer to make up ahadith, to bring down the Ahlul Bayt and to bring his Umayyad dynasty up. He did so many things. He was a media manipulator, no doubt about this. However, he used to give the illusion to the people, he would give the impression to the people that I am very pious, that I am very muttaqi. How would he do this? He would say, for example, that he is, for example, a sahab, or he is a sahabi or a companion of Rasulullah. This is what Muawiyah would do. What else would he do? For example, he would say that I am katib-e-wahi. I am the writer of the wahi. That is, Rasulullah told the companions, he told the hadith, and I'm the one who had it written down. Although it was not entirely true, he is someone who gave this illusion of piety. Also at the same time, he would give, for example, to show the public, try to give gifts to Ahlul Bayt, to Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein, to keep them at bay. Of course, he had no interest in actually helping them. He was trying to show people. So Muawiyah gave this impression that he was a pious person. However, he was nothing like this. What happened with Yazid? Yazid was that person who came forward and at that point in time was such a personality that he had no interest of even showing himself to be pious, even in a false way. How? First year in his rule, he kills Imam Hussein and the companions in the massacre of Karbala. But did he stop there? I'm saying this to the world where there are people who are now trying to defend Yazid in this world. What kind of people are there in this world who are trying to defend? The second year, he didn't stop after Karbala. He continued. He went to Masjid al-Nabi. He went to Masjid al-Nabi, that is in Medina, the sacred mosque in Medina. And he had horses that he used the mosque as stable. And he had women treated in the most undecent and undignified ways, which I cannot even say. Waqat al-Harra, these things that happened. The third year, he didn't stop there. The third year, what happened? He went to the Kaaba and he desecrated the honor of the Kaaba. What type of people are trying to defend this individual? You see, for example, in some parts of the world, there's this issue of, for example, Ziyarat Ashura. For example, there is a la'an, which is not curse, it is a dua for revoking mercy on certain individuals. Now, is this on all of Banu Umayyah or not, for example, when the ziyarah says this? According to our ulama in the Ahlul Bayt, they've given the answer of this. That, for example, it does not necessarily mean everyone. What do I mean? There are two rulers who are in Banu Umayyah that you and I should know. One is, for example, Muawiyah the second. Muawiyah the second was who? Muawiyah the second was the son of Yazid. This is the first personality. The other one is Umar the second, who was known as Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz is the person who is credited with giving Fadak back. So many times people say Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was a good Umayyi ruler. Yes, maybe relatively he was better, but was he good or not? We have to understand what the Ahlul Bayt say, not what we think. The second element is, was Muawiyah, what was his role or not? Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam clears this matter for us. That when Umar ibn Abdul Aziz died, people thought that maybe he was relatively better because he gave Fadak back. Maybe true, but Imam Baqir said that the people of this world cry for him, whereas the people of the heavens curse him. Yeah, Imam, what are you saying? He gave back Fadak. What else do you want? He said, no. He understood that the seat that he was occupying, that he was sitting in, belonged to us. yet he did not abdicate the throne. He did not leave the throne. He did not give it to us. That's what the Imam is saying. Whereas Muawiyah the second, that is the son of Yazid, he abdicated the throne. He says, I don't want to have anything to do with this. I don't want to be in this position. And therefore, when the ulama and the scholars say that when they say la'an or the dua for the revoking of mercy in Ziyarat Ashura, Muawiyah the second is not included. But it's possible that Umar the second is included. Nonetheless, this issue, if you know history and what the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah have said about Muawiyah and Yazid, you would not say these things. At least especially about Yazid. So therefore, Allama Tabatabai, coming back to what Allama Tabatabai said, it's not an issue of Hussein and Hassan. They would have done the exact same thing in either situation. If Imam Hassan's in Karbala, he does the same thing. And if Imam Hussein is in the situation of Imam Hassan, he does the same thing. You see, peace has a power. You see, patience has a power. Imam Hassan, he learned from his father. Imam Hussein learned from his father that the patience that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen had, his sons had. Is it easy for that person who was the first person to pray with Rasulullah, the first Muslim accepted by all Muslims, Ali ibn Abi Talib, to see other people usurp his right? Of course, for us, Ali ibn Abi Talib is the person who, after Rasulullah, his nur split. He's the first of creation after Rasulullah. It's Rasulullah's nur, then Ali ibn Abi Talib, and it splits into the Ahlul Bayt. But I'm saying for the general Muslim community, I'm asking you, the Muslim world, Ali ibn Abi Talib, does anyone know more patience than Ali ibn Abi Talib? His son had the same patience, Hassan al-Mujtaba. That patience can pay dividends. That patience can help you and I in our world. Why? Because we're living in a world on edge. We live in a world where, for example, you have a situation of this global pandemic, COVID. You have two very difficult situations. You have on one side uncertainty, and on the other side, you have isolation. What do I mean? If you look at our world, and for example, the criminal process or the justice process in our world, one of the things that the founding fathers of this country said, you have the right to a speedy trial, a quick trial, a fast trial. Why? Because they understood until this day in some parts of the world, try to do a legal case, it takes forever. They said that this is a form of torture that a person doesn't know and they're uncertain about their future. It drives a person mad on one level. On the other level, what's the most violent and one of the worst, I should say, forms of torture you can give someone in the justice system in our part of the world? It's called solitary confinement. When you put someone in isolation, many people have written on this and they said this is a form of torture. So if you put uncertainty and isolation together and you put it in a pressure cooker, this is what many people are suffering today. Many people are on edge, they're uneasy. In this environment, patience can be your greatest aid. The Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, the Ma'soom says in a beautiful tradition that when you have a calamity, a difficulty that befalls you, if you are a patient and have sabr, as the verse I recited in the beginning, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, seek help with patience and prayer. If you are patient, the Imam says, in the face of difficulty and calamity, there is another difficulty that is behind it. But if you have sabr, Allah will remove that difficulty that's about to come from you. Therefore, always try to be patient in a calamity, whether it's losing someone or any other difficulty that you face. I know it's difficult. A study conducted in 2012 looked at patience. And it, for example, it said that people who have patience, they have a release of serotonin in the brain. This leads to a more positive mood. It's at a cognitive level, at a psychological level, it helps you feel better. There are three types of patience that you can adopt in life. One is a patience, for example, that has to deal with the difficulties of life, the hardships of life. You lose a loved one, you lose a job, you lose something. That's one type of difficulty, one type of hardship. Another one is interpersonal. That is in our families, the husband, the wife, the children, the parents, these relationships, the community relationships, the friends in the mosque and the likes. This is another level. The third level is the daily hassles. That, for example, when you're on the highway and someone cuts you off, this type of thing. You notice, believe me, people in our COVID world are on edge. I was just reading a study today that the Financial Times quoted that showed that loneliness has skyrocketed just since the beginning of the year. People are totally lonely right now. Already, if you remember, I mentioned to you last time, 50 years, in the last 50 years, loneliness has doubled. It's not a coincidence that depression, anxiety, and by so many different mental health issues are on the rise in our society. Our society is leading us to be more mentally unstable. It's not a coincidence. So all of these things need to be kept in mind. Therefore, I'm telling people, don't argue with people at the supermarket. Don't argue with people on the highway. When someone has nothing to lose and they're facing uncertainty and they're facing loneliness, they will react in the most irrational way. We were told there's a moment in time, a man from Syria, from Sham. Remember, Sham is that area of Jordan, Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, modern day. This is where Muawiyah had his stronghold. Muawiyah had the stronghold here. A man from Sham comes to Medina. When he comes to Medina, he sees Imam Hassan alayhi salam, and he begins to curse at him. He begins to use the worst language towards him. He begins to disrespect him in the worst way. Imam Hassan didn't do anything. He just listened to him. As soon as he had finished, Imam Hassan looks at him. He says, "You look like you're a stranger. You look like you're not from this town. You look like you are from far away." He says, "If you are a stranger, if you're hungry, we'll give you food. If you need some new clothes, we'll give you new clothes. If you need anything, we'll give you a place. If you need a place to stay, my home is open to you. I have a place for you." The man got down from his horse and he was shocked. Why? Because Imam had the consciousness, the sha'ur, the understanding, the cognizance to be able to say, this person is cursing at me not because he knows who I am. No, he's cursing at me because Muawiyah has brainwashed him. Do we have this ma'arifah? Do we have this understanding? Do we have this realization? You see, Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam tells us in a beautiful tradition, when someone says something bad to you, even no matter what it is, you do not reply with evil. You do not reply with badness. Why? Because whatever is inside of you comes out. If you have love, compassion, kindness in your heart, you will not be able to be mean and vile and vicious with other people. Therefore, whatever you spew out is a reflection of what's in your heart. Always, the Ahlul Bayt say, be a zina for us. The Ahlul Bayt say, always be an ornament for us in public. Always be an ornament for the Ahlul Bayt in public, the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam say. I remember I was reading the news that over a $40 receipt or $40 purchase at a restaurant, someone literally was not willing to wait in line. They came and shot and killed someone. I'm telling you, researchers are going to say this is a very unstable and difficult time. The world is on edge. Adopt patience so that you can be more tranquil. What are some practical solutions that you can solve and deal with issues of anger and instability in your mind? Number one is identify your trigger. What makes you angry? What makes you upset? What makes you lack patience? For example, is it that, for example, the shoes are in the wrong place, for example, someone cut you off? As soon as you get angry, recognize that. Number two, reframe the situation. How? That, for example, the person who cut me off in traffic, maybe they had to get somewhere. Maybe they really had an emergency. Maybe their family member was in a life-death situation. Give the benefit of the doubt. Not for them, for your own sake, so that you can have peace of mind, because your blood pressure will go up. Your health will be affected. And the third thing you can do is take a break. I tell you, many times in our world, divorce rates are going up right now with COVID. People are living unstable lives. Spouses are getting in arguments. Children are seeing these arguments. When you will notice that your spouse is getting upset, as I told you in the past as well, make sure they've eaten. The phenomenon of hunger exists. Imam Hassan even recognized that maybe that Syrian was upset and he had not eaten. Eat something. Sometimes you get upset because you're hungry. Number one. Number two, on top of that, just take a break. Step away. Take a breather. Don't react. Take a break and you will notice it will benefit you, inshallah. Adopt patience the way the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam had patience. They were the mountains, the pillars of patience. And you will get happiness in your life. You will get tranquility in your life. It doesn't make sense to argue over the smallest things, to bicker over the smallest things. The next level of analysis I want to come in our agenda and schedule is the lineage of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. Because we know they are Sadat of, for example, the Tabatabai family, the Al-Hakim family, the Bahrul Ulum family, the Burjardi family. All these scholars' families go back to Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. So how is it possible that his lineage continued if we are told that Qasim ibn al-Hasan was martyred and shaheed in Karbala? Was Qasim ibn al-Hasan martyred in Karbala? No doubt, absolutely, 100% yes, he was martyred in Karbala, Qasim ibn al-Hasan. However, according to our ulama, they say that Imam Hassan alayhi salam had a few more children. By the way, I should say, the propaganda of Muawiyah was so much, and I should say this for our next generation, Muawiyah created a myth, and the Umayyads after him created a myth that Imam Hassan married and divorced many women. This is absolute lie. This is an absolute propaganda. This is absolute false. That propaganda that exists in our world today also existed at that time as well. And so Muawiyah knew how to do this to a T. So this is absolute false. But he did have a few sons. For example, Zayd ibn al-Hasan. For example, al-Hasan ibn al-Hasan, known as Hasan al-Muthanna, and Qasim ibn al-Hasan. So the lineage, we are told there's an individual by the name of al-Hasan ibn al-Hasan who was there on the day of Karbala. According to the historians, he lived even during the time of up till Marwan, he lived until this time. They say he was 53 years old when he passed away. Al-Hasan ibn al-Hasan, the son of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. He was 53 years old. If you do the math, he was 17 years old on the day of Ashura. On the day of Ashura, he was 17. How old was Qasim? Qasim ibn al-Hasan was 13. Therefore, he was about 4 years older than Qasim. They say he was there on the day of Karbala. He fought in the battle of Karbala. He was injured in the battle of Karbala. When he was injured in the battle of Karbala, he was left for dead. The enemy saw him. They left him for dead. They said he was going to die anyways. At that point in time, a lady by the name of Asma helped him to get to a nearby town. When he got to that nearby town, he survived. When he got to the nearby town and survived, there was a place where Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, he had built a lot of wealth, not for his own sake, to develop the land and to help the people. What do I mean? Ali ibn Abi Talib was a person who was a humanitarian of the highest caliber. Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would develop lands, 25 years, we say he was quiet. No, he was doing a tafsir of the Quran, he was building land, developing land. When he was developing this land, Amir al-Mu'mineen, he used to give this off to charity. So he took care of one of these towns where Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen had charity, and he used to deal with the endowments and the alms giving. And after that, according to the tradition, he married Imam Hussein's daughter. The narration says that Al-Hasan ibn al-Hasan, or Hasan al-Muthanna, he came towards Imam Hussein that, my uncle, I want to marry for your daughter, for example. He says, I have two daughters you are welcome to marry. He says he became shy, he became modest. At that point in time, Imam Hassan, his son, became modest. Imam Hussein alayhi salam said, very well, you can marry my daughter, Fatima, because she resembles my mother the most. And he married the daughter. Nonetheless, this is a historical reality. Afterwards, there were two sons through which the lineage of Imam Hassan continued. Zayd ibn al-Hasan and al-Hasan ibn al-Hasan, known as Hasan al-Muthanna. After Hasan al-Muthanna, he had another Hasan in his generation, known as Hasan al-Muthallath. That is the third Hasan. To the extent that there was a member of the lineage by the name of Ali Abid. Ali Abid, not Imam Sajjad. Ali Abid ibn al-Hasan al-Muthallath. During the time of Mansur al-Dawaniqi, he had put the Shia, in particular the Ahlul Bayt, into prison. When he had put the Ahlul Bayt into prison to such an extent, they didn't know the time of day, the Ahlul Bayt, the lineage of the Ahlul Bayt, they didn't know the time of day until they saw if Ali Abid was praying, they knew it was time for Fajr or Zuhr or Maghrib. That's the only way, because it was a dark prison. At that point in time, these are the tragedies and the difficulties the lineage of Imam Hassan alayhi salam has gone through in order for you and I to say that we are the Shia of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. These Sadat from the lineage of Imam Hassan, whether it's the Tabatabai family, the Al-Hakim family, the Burjardi family, for example, and the likes, the Bahrul Ulum family, these people are the Hassani Sadat who helped raise the honor of Shiaism. I remember Ayatollah Al-Hakim, who's one of the main marjas in Najaf today, Ayatollah Sayyid Sa'id Al-Hakim, for 9 years, 8 to 9 years, he was in the prison, totally innocent, under the regime of Saddam. All the other scholars, many of them left, for example, and they went towards Qom. He said, I can't leave. If I leave, maybe the Hawza will collapse. His family directly told me he used to teach from the Quran, and they said afterwards he would give all the references from his memory in prison. So when they checked the references afterwards, they said every reference was spot on. And if it was off by 1 or 2 pages maximum. These are the difficulties the Ahlul Bayt's lineage went through in order to preserve Tashayyu. You and I should remember this and keep this in mind. But how did the Ahlul Bayt, how were they treated? How was Imam Hassan alayhi salam treated? We are told there's a moment in time that Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, Ju'da, his wife, who had been paid by Muawiyah, she mixed poison into his food. The Imam alayhi salam in drink. The Imam alayhi salam took this and the poison began to seep into his blood. The poison began to seep and the Imam alayhi salam began to vomit. When he began to vomit, we are told that his organs began to fall into the tray. When his organs began to fall into the tray, the Ahlul Bayt, Imam Hassan, Sayyidah Zainab, they are all surrounding, they are seeing this. When they are seeing this, at that moment, Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he says, oh Hussein, oh my brother Hussein, cover this. Make sure that you put a cloth over these organs. He says, why my brother? He says, oh Hussein, do this because I do not want Zainab to see this situation. She will not be able to take it. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. This was the musibah of Imam Hassan alayhi salam. But the musibah didn't stop there. We are told there was a zakir, a reciter. He was reciting the musibah of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. And when he recited the musibah of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, he went to sleep that night. And in his dream, he sees Imam Hassan. He says, oh zakir, oh reciter, why do you not tell the people of my musibah, of my calamity? He says, Yabna Rasulillah, I tell them of your calamity. I tell them of your difficulty. He says, I tell them that you will begin to vomit your organs, your liver into the tray. I tell them that you are poisoned by your own wife. I tell them that your body left the house, an arrow struck it. I tell them that you are not allowed to be able to be buried next to your grandfather Rasulullah. I tell them everything. He says, oh Zakir, you don't tell them my biggest calamity. He says, Ya Ibna Rasulillah, Ya Ibna Rasulillah, what is that? He says, it was the city of Medina. I was in Medina. I was only a few years old. And they brought fire to the door of our house. When they brought fire to the door of our house, one person who was a la'een, he brought fire and he put fire on the house. He put his foot on the door and he pushed the door in. My mother, she was pressed between the door. But oh reciter, do you know what I saw with my eyes? My greatest musibah. He said, Ya Ibn Rasulillah, what is it? He says, I was only a few years old. I saw my mother slapped on the face in front of my eyes. I could never see those people in the city again because every time I saw them, that scene would be revived in my eyes. You didn't tell them about that. Ajrukum ala Allah. Ajrukum ala Allah. I will not take much more of your time. Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, he began to ooze out the organs and he said, cover them. His holy soul, he began to become weaker. His soul left his body. Imam Hussein gave ghusl and he gave kafan to Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. They took the body out and they wanted to bury him towards Masjid al-Nabi next to Rasulullah. But the opposition, they began to fire arrows. And when they fired arrows, they had to bring the body of Hassan al-Mujtaba back. And they had to bury him in Jannatul Baqi. But what did Imam Hassan say? Imam Hassan saw Imam Hussein crying when he saw the poison's effect. He said, oh Hussein, why do you cry? He says, I cry because I see you in this state. Imam Hassan said, oh Hussein, La yawmuka yawmuka ya Aba Abdullah. There is no day like your day, oh Aba Abdullah. and I would put my hands together and I would say, Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba, you asked Imam Hussein to cover the tray so that Zainab doesn't see, but come to Karbala. Qasim is trampled by the hooves of the horses. Zainab saw. Hussein's body is trampled by the hooves of the horses. Zainab saw. And Hussein's head was raised on the spear. Zainab saw. Zainab, 1,000 salams on you. You saw that Al-Hassan had arrows shot on his janaza, and salams on you, Zainab. You saw that Hussein had arrows all over his body. Al-Hassan, what did Zainab not see with her eyes? ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. Ya Allah, we ask you that anyone who has a hajat in this night, grant them their hajat. Ya Allah, alleviate us from this difficulty, this global pandemic. Grant a solution and respite. Ya Allah, allow us to learn from the life of Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba and allow us to understand him and adopt patience in our lives. Ya Allah, hasten the reappearance of Imam Sahib al-Zaman and allow us to be amongst his companions when he returns. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. Ma'tam Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein,
Ya
Ya
Hussein,
Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein.
زہرا کی دعا ہے ماتم یہ ماتم کیسے رک جائے. زہرا کی دعا ہے ماتم یہ ماتم کیسے رک جائے. کونین کی ہر دولت دے کر اس غم کی حفاظت کرنا ہے. شبیر کی خاطر جینا ہے, شبیر کی خاطر مرنا ہے. یہ جسم رہے یا مٹ جائے, مظلوم کا ماتم کرنا ہے. زہرا کی تمنا پوری ہو, یہ جان رہے یا ٹوٹ جائے. زہرا کی دعا ہے ماتم یہ ماتم کیسے رک جائے. اس پرچم کی عظمت کے لیے عباس نے بازو دے ڈالے. اس پرچم کی عزت کے لیے غازی نے سہے دل پر بھالے. اس پرچم کے مشکیزے سے لپٹے ہیں سکینہ کے نالے. عباس علی کا پرچم ہے, یہ پرچم کیسے جھک جائے. زہرا کی دعا ہے ماتم یہ ماتم کیسے رک جائے. جب تک کہ سکت اس جسم میں ہے, حق ادا کر دینا ہے. قسمت جو سعادت دے ہم کو, یہ جان فدا کر دینا ہے. یا اشک سے یعقوب نے دل سے اس دامن کو بھر دینا ہے. آئی ہے یہاں ایک شہزادی, امید کا دامن پھیلائے. زہرا کی دعا ہے ماتم یہ ماتم کیسے رک جائے. یہ ماتم ہے حلمن کی صدا, ہر اشک ہے جذبہ نصرت کا. یوں حق کی طرف آ جانے کا حاصل ہے ابھی تک ایک موقع.
पहचान ज़मीरो दिल की सदा इस मातम में शामिल हो जा। शबीर बुलाते हैं अब तक, गर हुर हो कोई तो आ जाए। ज़हरा की दुआ है मातम ये मातम कैसे रुक जाए। या हुसैन, या हुसैन, या हुसैन।
Brother Yar Mohammed.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. چشم جهان بسوگ حسن گریه می کند، تنها نه این دو دیده من گریه می کند. هر لاله که داغ به دل برگرفته است، در سوگ آن بهار چمن گریه می کند. تنها نلاله هر شقایق که آتش است، آتش گرفته سوخته تن گریه می کند. این که سیاه پوش شده باغ مصطفی، خاموش بلبل است و سمن گریه می کند. یا حسین. من گدایم گدای حسینم، عاشق کربلای حسینم. داده جان تشنه در رای جانان، از فداکاریش زنده قرآن. تا که باشد مرا در بدن جان، همچو من در نوای حسینم. من گدایم گدای حسینم، عاشق کربلای حسینم. حبی و گشت آیین دینم، حق بود این چو باشد یقینم. کی شود کربلایش ببینم، من که نوحه سرای حسینم. من که نوحه سرای حسینم. من گدایم گدای حسینم، عاشق کربلای حسینم. کردم بر نیزه قرآن تلاوت، تا کنند کوفیان را هدایت. او شدند جان فدا بهر امت، من به غم مبتلای حسینم. من گدایم گدای حسینم عاشق کربلای حسینم کرده بر نیز قرآن تلاوت تا کنند کوفیان را هدایت او شدم جان فدا بهر امت من به غم مبتلای حسینم من به غم مبتلای حسینم من گدایم گدای حسینم عاشق کربلای حسینم داد جان در ره دین و ایمان داد جان در ره دین و ایمان کرده پاینده از نام قرآن از غمش دادن جان روز و شب در عزای حسینم روز و شب در عزای حسینم من گدایم گدای حسینم عاشق کربلای حسینم من گدای شی کربلایم من در این بارگل آشنایم و دلم کوفتاد از پایم مستحق در عزای حسینم من گدایم گدای حسینم عاشق کربلای حسینم من گدایم گدای حسینم عاشق کربلای حسینم یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین
زيارته سيد الشهداء. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله، السلام عليك يا ابن رسول الله، السلام عليك يا ابن أمير المؤمنين وابن سيد الوسيين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليكم سائر الشهداء كربلاء خصوصا سيدي مولاي أبا الفضل العباس يا ابن أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا غريب الغرباء، السلام عليك يا معين الضعفاء والفقراء، السلام عليك يا سلطان يا أبا الحسن يا علي ابن موسى يا الرضا، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا صاحب الأسر والزمان، السلام عليك يا شريك القرآن، السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان، عجل الله تعالى فرجك وسأل الله تعالى مخرجك وزهورك. السلام عليك وعلى آبائك الطيبين الطاهرين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
Inshallah, we have Majlis again tomorrow, same time, 8 o'clock, and then on Sunday at 2 o'clock, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Khuda Hafiz.